Hello and welcome. My name's Hannah from To The Being Mindful Movement. Get yourself into some really comfy, cozy clothes and see if you can find somewhere relatively cushioned to work with on the floor. So if you've got some kind of mat, go ahead and roll that out. Perhaps you're on carpet or a rug. And if it is needed, you could even gather a couple of cushions. Maybe you'd like to even start with a pillow under the back of your head. You're really welcome to do that as we start nestling into our first pose of simply lying down. Take your time wriggling in to whatever feels a place of stability and comfort to begin with. So don't worry if you're still doing your little shuffles here, arranging your clothes, hair, or just creating that space that you need around you. And once you do find yourself in some kind of stillness, let's go ahead and inhale through the nose and just take a real easy, gentle sigh through the mouth. You're welcome to add that kind of breath at any point that feels necessary to reconnect to the now, if it's useful. Perhaps you could think of me just as a guide today. I'll be making several suggestions about how you might like to move your body. You're welcome to pause somewhere that feels more appropriate for your body. So don't feel that you have to match everything I say or what you see perhaps on the screen. Remember that this is your practice today. So as we lay here, what do you notice? Perhaps all you can notice is your mind racing, being elsewhere. Perhaps some of you are able to depict sounds that might surround you in this moment. Maybe it's that you feel the earth supporting you or feeling sturdy, strong, solid beneath your body. Perhaps you notice a temperature within the room or upon or in your body. Throughout our practice today, I'll be inviting you to come towards your senses. And for some of us, this can be useful as a grounding tool, just like a deep breath or a rhythmic breath. Again, these are all suggestions that you might try. And perhaps you'll figure out what works and what doesn't work for you in your own practice. As we continue to lie here, perhaps I could bring your attention to a few different body parts. And when I mention a body part, just notice whatever might arise for you. Without judgment, without critique, or without having to change something. See if you can just be with the sensation and maybe the image of that part of your body. So just noticing perhaps the back of your head and the connection to earth or pillow. And then going a little bit lower, and we'll stay with the parts of the body that might be connected to the ground. So what part of your upper back feels like it's touching the earth? And are any parts of the lower back touching the ground? Or perhaps we scoop our attention down now towards the buttocks, towards the thighs. Continuing attention of connection to earth and body. Lower down the leg to perhaps the calves. Noticing where perhaps on the back of the leg and the lower leg we lose connection to earth until we find connection of the heels and ground. We'll scoot our way up the body, a little more focused towards the back of the shoulders, and noticing perhaps now what parts of the back of the arms touch ground. Maybe the elbows, perhaps the forearm is touching the ground, perhaps it isn't. And just noticing now the back of the hand and the knuckles. Visualizing the body as a whole here. And then from here, when you feel like you're ready to take your first move, we are simply going to lengthen our whole body. Raise the arms slowly up and overhead, as far as you feel like you can. If you find that reaching your shoulders up and over is a little uncomfy, just bring the arms out a little more to the side. I'm going to flex my feet, pulling toes towards the kneecaps, and reach those fingers way up overhead and reach the heels as far away as you can from the fingertips. We pause here for another breath. Lengthen out even more if you can. And then sigh as you release. Soften your way down with the arms. And just pausing, resting. I've chosen to rearrange my hands onto the lower belly. You might choose to place your hands somewhere else. I've chosen to completely relax the muscles throughout my body now. Seeing how this very subtle change of adding a little strength to muscles so that I can extend outwards from center to this complete letting go and release once more. I'll be inviting you to come back to this neutral resting pose between each different movement that we work through in our practice today. You might like to think about this part as a reset, a time to connect to a reset. Now, start to bend the knees, placing the feet on the ground. So this part, I like to see if I can visualize the width of my hips. And we're not going really wide with the feet. We're not going really narrow with the feet. Just feel a sense of hip width apart with the feet. So I like to now think about stacking my knees on top of the heels. Don't worry if your feet are further away from the buttocks or if they're tucked in a bit closer, but just find somewhere that kind of feels right and natural and, of course, with ease in your own body. So we have natural curves of the spine, and we don't want to get rid of those. They're there for a suspension of the spine and the body so that we can hold the weight of our head and our shoulders above the hips. So we're just going to work with the natural curves, and we're going to exaggerate them a little bit here and then try and also pull them out a little bit. So you might notice, if it's possible for you to place one hand underneath the lower back, that there is this space in the lumbar, the base of the spine, between the earth and your back body. We are going to try to reduce the space and exaggerate that space now with a tilting of the pelvis. So I'm not thinking that I want to lift the hips up. I'm just seeing if I can sway the hips and buttocks. So do what feels comfortable with your arms. You might have them resting palms down beside the hips. I'm not bringing mine super close. I'm going to be quite relaxed through the arms. You might have the arms a lot wider. Maybe you have them in more of a cactus plant shape, palms face up. Do what feels right for you. Pressing down into your feet, not just the heels, but spreading the weight across all four corners. Could you now imprint your lower back into the earth? So that means drawing pubic bone towards the navel and directing sit bones underneath and forwards and up. So we're trying to bring that gap behind us into a reduced amount, so there's no longer lots of space in the lower back and the earth. And then we'll do the opposite here. So we're going to start to exaggerate that space that you have. You could always keep a hand there for the first few rounds beneath your back, pressing your spine into your hand, and then back and up. So when you're ready, you're going to just move really in your own time. And you might choose to close the eyes. Don't feel that you have to hold this or squeeze this in any way. Remember, this is mindful movement. So it's more about creating movement and shapes. It is not about having to work out or be strong. Here we are, trying to draw inwards and be with our experience of this movement. Could I invite you to play with creating now the smallest amount of movement you could manage? So if I was to stand next to you and observe, I could barely see you move and sway. And just notice how maybe you have to concentrate really deeply to do that. For some of us, we might find this easier or more obtainable. For some of us, we might find this tiny action much harder. And then if you would like to, you could play with trying to exaggerate that movement once again, or perhaps go even deeper than you have before. We're not trying to be contortionists. We're just exploring our own body's movement, how that might come up for us in terms of sensation, or even our thoughts about body, or perhaps just this moment. And then just starting to slow that movement down until you come to stillness. If you would prefer to rest with the knees bent, go ahead and do that. You might even track the knees inwards to touch. Or once again, come back to that long length of the body as we take a pause and reset. You might think of this moment as a moment to rebound. The body becomes neutral once again. Perhaps in these moments of stillness is when you're able to notice more sensation, a warming or a cooling, a tingling. Do you notice any parts of the body speaking a little louder or clearer to you in this moment? And then let your thoughts disperse. When it feels right for you to move again, we're going to gather the knees in towards our body now. So here we are having a little hug. You might start off by being quite gentle with yourself here. So it might be that you're just holding onto the knees or the shins, however kind of you can grip. If you find that the knees need to be a bit wider, that's totally fine. It's up to you. And then again, you might play with that sensation. Perhaps you already noticed when you started to bring the knees up that your spine will also find more connection, more surface area touching the ground as we're lightly pressing all of the length of the spine, including the lumbar again, into the ground. And you might play around with that a little bit, maybe by turning the knees from side to side. And I'm going to be quite gentle and subtle with this movement. Perhaps noticing how the distribution of weight changes through the lower back. Noticing whether any of these sensations feel pleasant or perhaps negative for you today. Knowing that there is no right and wrong in terms of how you feel. We just want to always be cautious when we're experiencing pain. A little discomfort here and there may be something that we can work with in a mindful, gentle capacity. And remember, you can always pause and rest a lot sooner than my instructions. I'm just coming to stillness in a place that feels comforting for me for one more breath. And then again, we'll go ahead and gently release. Maybe you're placing the feet back onto the earth, or perhaps lengthening the legs fully in that moment of rebound and reset. Come back to sensations. Come back to the moment. Perhaps you're just noticing your surroundings rather than your body. Perhaps you're noticing your breath. So at this point, I invite you now to draw your right knee in. So we work both legs initially, and now we're seeing what bringing one leg in might feel like. If we're finding that's really challenging to grab that knee and we just need a little bit more room, go ahead and place the left foot to the ground. That's completely up to you in your body in this moment. And that might give you just a little extra ease and space that you require, or it might just feel better. So noticing perhaps now the connection of that right back hip and the earth. Maybe you notice some deeper sensations through the front of the right hip. Starting off relatively still. And then again, inviting a little bit of movement if that feels right for you. Perhaps you hold on with one hand and add a few really small, minute semicircles or circles. For some of us, gentle swaying movement can be far more nourishing than complete stillness, and vice versa. So here again, just exploring what feels right for you in your body today. We're going to go ahead and swap the legs over before we take that time of rebound. So just take a moment to reposition yourself. Perhaps you step through slowly with a couple of rounds of breath. And here we are exploring what you need on that second side. So knowing that both sides can come up for us in different ways. And that can be dependent on perhaps past injuries, or perhaps the way that we were born, for example. And also whether we overuse one side, underuse one side comparatively. And I'm afraid that stress also comes up for us physically in the body. So we can end up being a little lopsided due to muscles becoming quite tense. Perhaps again you're exploring stillness or movement. Last few breaths on that second side. And then go ahead and gently extend the leg, or again placing the feet on the earth and the knees gently teepeed together. Let's come to pause. This time, we're going to draw the knees in and roll to one side to make our way onto our hands and knees. So gently flipping over onto your front, and we're going to plant hands and knees to the earth. Now, if you have sensitive wrists, perhaps today being on the forearms will be helpful to you instead. If you have sensitive knees, perhaps doubling up the mat or getting some cushion or blanket under the knees will be supportive enough for you. So we're making our way into what we often refer to as tabletop pose. Hands underneath the shoulders and the knees underneath the hips. Those lovely curves of the spine, we're going to start to roll through them. So going into our cat pose, we want to round the back body, seeing if we can tuck pubic bone in towards the navel, maybe looking towards the navel. And then we drop the belly and lift the heart, lifting the sit bones, maybe lifting the gaze for cow, and then rolling back and forth. I usually think about exhaling to round into cat, and then inhaling to arch into cow. So just moving freely with the rhythm of your own breath. And we have these curves of the spine already in place. So when you next come into your scared cat, are you able to focus a little more on rounding through the lower back, where actually we have lordosis? And then when we come into our cow pose, are you able to see if you can create a little more opening through the heart, where we have general kyphosis? So we're seeing if we can concentrate on rounding the lower back a little more on your exhale into your cat, and then opening up a little more through the heart, lengthening as you inhale into your cow. So still maybe moving with the rhythm of your breath. Let's take one more round. And then see if you can come to a neutral line of the spine. So you're looking down just in front of your fingertips. And at this point, if you feel like you could add on a little bit to your balance, maybe you can bring your knees a little bit closer than hip width, and then extend the right leg back. If you need to, tuck the toes to the earth, and then just see what it might feel like to lift and hover. If you feel like you're quite stable with your balance today, maybe you start to creepy crawl your left fingers forwards on the earth. Perhaps you could even hover your left hand. Focusing your gaze, your eyes straight down will be helpful. We're going to hold for 2 more breaths. Balances will often bring us right into the moment, not necessarily feeling super poised. Bringing the hand and the knee down. Let's sink the hips back towards the heels. And don't worry if they don't touch, just push the hips back, reach the hands forwards. And then we'll come back up onto hands and knees. So we'll test that out on the other side, and you might again notice one side is far more obtainable than the other. So I like to bring my knees a fraction closer than hip width at this point. Maybe left toes touch the earth, maybe they hover. Pause with the leg for a moment, then see what you can do by bringing the right hand forwards. It could touch the earth, or perhaps you lift it and hover. We're reaching fingers away from that back heel. Don't worry if you're wibbly wobbly, but see if you can draw the lower ribs in a little bit more for stability. And then lower the hand, lower the knee. If it's obtainable, widen the knees, push the hips back towards the heels and reach hands further forwards. This might not be possible. You might have the hips a lot higher. Perhaps you're on the forearms, so I'm creating a slightly different shape here that might feel a little more obtainable. Last breath. Some of you might drop right back with the hips. And then from here, once again, we're going to return to our spine. Let's come back to our place of rebound. Seeing where our attention is pulled towards in the body. So this time, we're going to place soles of feet onto the earth. And once you've done that, again, let's just check in with the width of the feet, just like in that first practice of this shape. We want the feet at hip width, knees on top of the heels there. We want this to be a solid foundation, so in a moment we'll be rolling the hips up, and we want to avoid the knees widening or narrowing too much. Could we try to have a sense of focus of solid legs? This time, could you bring your palms to face down, reaching your fingertips towards your heels? They do not have to touch. And then have a conscious drawing in and under of the shoulder blades. So I press the back of my head into the earth and tuck shoulder blades in. Now, advice here is to definitely not have anything underneath the back of your head. So if you have a pillow there, please do remove it before you attempt to add this movement in. We'll be rolling up into a bridge shape pose. So start to press firmly into all 4 corners of your feet, and then start by drawing the pubic bone towards the navel. Remember that exaggerated curve of the spine we were doing in our tilts of the pelvis? We want to draw pubic bone towards the navel and then press and roll our way up. Once you get about halfway, maybe there's a little more room to draw the shoulder blades in. If not, don't worry, you pause where you can. Hold. Could you lift the hips a little higher? We're going to roll back down again, and we'll do this 2 more times. So 1 vertebrae at a time rolls down, so it's a reverse rolling until the buttocks, the sit bones, start to connect down. And then again, tilt the pubic bone towards the navel, drawing that belly button in gently as you raise those hips. Press down with your hands or the fists, and then slowly roll down. The next one, if it's possible, we're going to hold for 3 breaths. Now, if you do have a yoga mat, something else you might try is grabbing onto the edge of that mat and actually pull out. For some of us, that gives us that little extra oomph just to be able to stabilize. So I'm going to do that with you. Tuck those pubic bone towards the navel, or one pubic bone that you have, not those, and roll your way up. This time, could you pause? Maybe you've got 3 breaths in you to pause here. 2 and 1, and then gently roll your way back down, finding slow connection of back and earth. Let's go ahead and pause. This time we're pausing just for a short period of time, because the next movement can be a wonderful release for that pose that we were just doing, the bridge there. So already bringing the feet back down to the earth, knees bent. Just create a little space with your arms here, and go ahead and drop the knees down towards the right side. Maybe you'd like to move with breath here a little bit. Inhale, lift the knees, and then drop them to the left side. Don't worry if the knees and the thighs are not touching the ground. Just swaying like windscreen wipers through the legs for a few more rounds. The next time that my knees reach towards the right side, I'm going to pause and just let the legs be heavy. If it feels comfortable for the neck, maybe try turning your head towards the left side. If not, keep the head neutral. Remembering that today's practice is not about creating amazingly beautiful shapes. It is all about our connection to physical sensations in the moment, in our body. What can you picture in terms of a sense of shape of your body in your mind's eye in this moment? And then gently draw the knees back up, and we'll shift it to the other side. You don't have to turn the head if it's uncomfortable in any way. Keep the head more centered, otherwise just see what it feels like to turn it. Again, maybe visualizing your body in this zigzag shape. And then slowly bringing yourself back up to center. Let's go ahead and pause. You could think about this moment as a place to just be, instead of always doing. How does it feel to just be and give yourself permission to be here? Slowly, you're going to bring your feet towards the ground. When you're ready, knees bent. And we'll start by lifting the right leg upwards. Now, we're going to attempt to reach along that right leg, if we can, anywhere at all. And it might be that the leg is very bent or a little bent. Perhaps you're just scooting right up behind the back of that knee. Just attempt to do what you can by raising that right foot towards the ceiling. And then don't worry about what you're seeing on screen. I am a yoga teacher. I have a certain amount of movement ability. But if it's possible, your hands will rise higher And if it's feeling like you want to, you could even lift your head towards that leg in the sky. So if that's feeling too much, if you've given it a go and you're trying this out and you've decided, ooh, that's not for me, just slowly rest your head, your shoulders back down. And perhaps we no longer need to fully reach towards the foot or the heel. I'm going to come back to a midpoint, lowering head and shoulders, pausing with my breath, and then lowering that leg. Take a breath between the two sides, and then we'll swap it over. So again, wherever you can take hold of the back of that left leg, maybe starting off here with head and shoulders to the ground. Maybe you're exploring, where can my hands go on that leg? If you are going to do this video again and you feel like you need a little extra help in the future, you could always grab a cord of a dressing gown or some sort of yoga strap and bring it over the foot to help aid you. But we're not actually trying to go into the deepest stretch possible here. It really is a place for us to be gentle with our body and be more with the exploration of sensation. I've lifted the head for a few breaths, and now I'm going to lower it. You might already have done so. And then slowly lowering that foot. Again, let's come to pause. A few moments to rebound. Perhaps that particular pose brought up quite a bit of sensation for you. Maybe you've noticed quite a lot of resistance in the body. Perhaps that brought up certain visualizations or thoughts. And in our mindful way, we send a message of love and kindness and honor where we're at in our practice of movement in this moment. This is how it is, and that's okay. When you're ready to move again, we're going to lie on our side. So don't worry about which side you start with. Maybe you're just facing towards me. And maybe we'll start with the legs a little bit bent here. If you can, you'll actually have both legs straight, but that can be a little bit more tricky for balance. So just see how you go. I'm going to extend the top leg, and I've supported like a tripod with my bottom arm here. You could also use the other hand to support. We're going to start to lift and lower that top leg. So try to avoid kind of collapsing in and looking towards the foot. See if you can shine the heart forwards, and then start to activate a little bit through the foot by flexing as you lift and lower. So you could do this in your own time. Maybe both legs are straight if you feel like you can. And it might be that you're playing around with the bottom leg bent and the bottom leg straight just to get really stable there. So I like to think about lifting as I inhale, lower as I exhale. You might take a little breather between a lift and a lower. I'll take two more, perhaps you're still with me. And on this last one, I'm actually going to pause. Perhaps you're with me, perhaps you're not. We're using strength to hold. And then soften. So you might lay onto your back as you pause. I'm going to shuffle around to the other side so that I'm still facing the screen, but we'll set up pretty quickly to go through to the second side. So a little tripod with the underarm. Again, maybe supporting with that top arm. Perhaps knees bent will be helpful. It could be that you have the knees bent as you do this, top leg straight as you do this. I like to think about having the foot flexed, and I'm not moving too fast here. Perhaps both legs are straight, and just going in your own rhythmic time. 2 more lifts here, bit of activation through glutes. All right, there we are, pausing for 3, for 2, for 1, and lower. And let's go ahead and lay onto our belly this time. So that's actually going to be our time to pause. If you're not a fan of being on your belly for a long period of time, the next pose is on the belly. So you might want to start here, just pausing on your back. But otherwise, just taking an opportunity to pause and rest. Position your head and your arms where you're comfortable. I'm just sort of turning towards the screen so that you can still hear me here. If you have chosen to lie on your belly, maybe you notice the rise and fall of your body as you breathe. The pressing down, the expansion of belly as you breathe. So I'm going to give you a couple of options here to position your head and your arms. We're going to move through the next pose on our bellies, and it could be that you'd like to rest your forehead on your hands here. So I've spread elbows wide. So this might be more comfortable for you to do. If you're comfortable going there, you could rest your chin lightly on the ground or just hover it slightly as you reach the arms back. If you're reaching the arms back, I've dropped the back of the hands to the earth, and I'm drawing the shoulder blades together closer and the shoulders away from the ears, just for a little bit of strength added here. So I like to glue my legs together to start with. You don't have to, but we're going to see if we can do alternative leg lifts. Again, let's start with moving with breath. So I'm going to lift my right leg, and you lift it as high as you can or want to, and then lower it down. So you might be joining in here, left leg rising, and then lowering. It could be that you need to change where you have your forehead or your arms. I've got my face lifted off the earth again so that you guys can hear me clearly in this moment. And see if you can notice how you have to redistribute your muscles and the engagement of the muscles as you alternate between the 2 legs. Maybe you notice that you also press down into opposite hand as you lift a leg or sweep it up. All right, next time you come to that first leg, for me it was my right leg, we'll pause for 3, for 2, you don't have to go super high, for 1, and then lower, pause, take at least a full breath. And then we'll go to that second side for 3, for 2, for 1, and let's rest. If you prefer resting on your back, feel free to do that. If you were on your belly and you had your head turned one way, turn your head the opposite way. We've got 1 more pose to add. Taking another 2 more clear, full breaths as you pause. So we'll reset our body. And again, if possible, this time you have got the arms back behind you. We're going to see if we can lift both legs. We'll do 3 rounds. The last one we'll attempt to hold for 3. The first 2 we'll just lift as we breathe in, and we'll lower as we breathe out. So in yoga, we would refer to this as a locust pose. You're actually going to attempt to lift your head and shoulders as well this time. You can keep the back of your hands resting into the earth, or you might reach them up off the earth. This is quite an activated pose. So it might be that only your head and shoulders lift, or maybe only your feet lift. Just see what you can do
in our 3 rounds. So take an exhale, just pause, relax. And then as you inhale, inject energy through the fingertips towards the heels. Raise those feet. I like to point toes. It just gives me a sense of activation. And then exhale, soften back down towards the earth. Rest the forehead to the ground. We'll do that 2 more times. 1 more with our breath rhythm. All right, inhale. Lift those toes, lift the head, the fingers, the arms. And exhale, soften down. 1 more time. This time you might be able to pause. When you're ready, inhale, rise up. For 3, maybe you turn the gaze a little forwards. 2, reach those fingertips and toes and soften down. This time I invite you to roll to your back when you are ready. Perhaps it feels good to take an inhale through the nose once you find your way onto your back. And an exhale through the mouth. Here we find ourselves in our final resting pose, often referred to as Shavasana, a time for deep rest, and maybe even a time for gratitude, for accomplishing what you have accomplished today in your movement practice. When you might feel ready to add a little movement, perhaps you'll start by wiggling your fingers and your toes, making that movement greater by wiggling out more and more, perhaps turning it into a stretch before you go ahead and roll to one side, easily making your way upright. Thank you so much for joining today's mindful movement practice, and be well.